Hello and welcome to episode 107 of the Foundry Roundtable, the podcast exclusively covering the Foundry for Star Trek Online. I'm your Tame Foundry author, Drogan1701. With me is the man who accidentally knocked out the stock exchange today, Markhawkman.
It was an accident.
You set an EPO loose in the stock exchange, didn't you? And we have Greendragoon, who is the only real choice to play Han Solo in the new Star Wars anthology film.
Actually, you got those backward. I'm the one who knocked out the stock exchange, and Mark is trying out for Han Solo.
And we have our guest with us tonight. Please welcome again to our show one of our biggest fans, Prime 13.
You're both wrong. I knocked out the stock exchange when I spent 40 million energy credits trying to level this thing today.
This is turning into one of those I'm Spartacus moments. You're all claiming responsibility. So obviously...
I'm not sure responsibility is the right word for my claim.
None of you are guilty, apparently. So we've had a few weeks of differently formatted shows. We've been working on a Foundry mission, and we did our joint show with Tribbles and Ecstasy last week, so I thought we'd get back to sort of one of our normal shows this week.
So there isn't too much... And ruined your plan.
Oh, no, this is a normal thing for us, a thing that we'll get to in a few minutes. There isn't really too much Foundry news going on. I did speak air quotes, with Zeronius Rex earlier this week on Tribble. She did say that they are still looking into our 2D map display bug. So hopefully that they will at some point make some progress on that. Although the funny thing is I was actually in the Foundry building the other day and was kind of liking the sort of semi-transparent objects that I was building with, rather than the completely solid stuff. So, I don't know. Take the good with the bad, I guess.
I have noted that in certain situations, the staticky effect makes it so that you cannot distinguish objects from each other, because I looked at that in one of the maps that I did, and everything merged into this big multicolored mass, and the only way to figure out the shape of an object was to click on it in the list on the left, and then the colors of that object would change slightly.
It's definitely not good, and I want it fixed, of course, like everybody else. But there was one or two times when it was like, ooh, it's kind of nice to be able to see this thing under that thing. So, I don't know. I sort of remember... back when we had all it was wireframes for objects.
Yeah,
they weren't solid.
That was kind of interesting.
It was, again, good and bad. I think probably on the whole I like the solid objects the best, though.
It'd be nice if we had the option to switch between them, because certain maps I've done, having solid objects makes it so that you really can't see anything. Because when you place certain objects, they completely obstruct your view of everything else.
It's true.
And if you put things in the other order, well, you still can't tell where things actually are, because you say place a console next to a wall, but what you actually see on the overlay is a console sitting on top of the roof of a building. You can't see where the wall is in the preview pane.
Well, at the risk of yet again bringing up something that Different Winters Foundry has that we don't, they have the ability to prioritize the view order of which assets appear on top in the 2D map editor.
Yeah, well, you know, what can you say other than, hey, you know, lots of stuff from Neverwinter that we'd like to have?
Yeah. Just keep poking every once in a while.
Every once in a while. So, of course, the other thing that's been going on is just today, in fact, they turned on pre-patching for season 10.5, or at least we assume it's season 10.5, probably a pretty safe assumption. Some of the things that are coming with it include the area that we are sitting in, as you look at the video stream, which is the new. What is this thing actually called? Krenim Outpost Fleet Holding?
Delta Research Holding, I believe.
Delta Research Holding. So it's the new Fleet
Research
Holding
Lab.
Research Lab that we will all get to have and contribute to and get stuff from. And Primar and Lord Ice, who you also will be able to see on our video stream here, running around, have been working on getting it completed, mostly completed. I believe they're mostly through Tier 2 and getting ready to do the Tier 3 upgrade, right?
We have finished all the sub-tracks. We're sitting at Tier 3, and we've got the upgrade project slotted. We're like 400 off short of the final completion.
Fantastic. So let's see. Let's take a little tour here, and we can, as we often do when we get a new map or a new fleet holding like this, we can point at all the objects that we'd love to have in the Foundry, which is basically everything. Starting with these chairs and conference table. It's pretty nice.
Yeah, I think they should get a separate bakery delivery just for these chairs.
Chairs are nice.
Those would almost work as like captain's chairs.
They would, but they're also wonderfully generic.
Yes. It would be useful in a lot of different areas. I love these books here.
I'm kind of surprised that the devs didn't like attach their own names on all these books.
But it's the same
Just
book
right on the
repeated
spine.
over and over again.
Yeah, I would have put my
And,
name on the spine of each one.
As Eswal has been finding out, your secrets will come out eventually.
Yeah.
You see these display cases. Those are right out of Year of Hell, which that was the kind of display case that he had the lock of his wife's hair in. Held it in like temporal stasis or something, so it didn't disappear even though she never existed.
Well, it was a lot smaller compared to what
Yes, that was smaller.
Well, didn't that use the same sort of, like, I guess you could say, sideways time stream technology that kept the rest of the ship from aging, I guess?
Yeah, it was a derivation of that technology.
Now this thing here sitting on the shelf, I just noticed, that's what, Dyson Tech?
Mm-hmm.
This little spire?
It's like something you see on the Dyson Ground Zone.
Yeah, all this stuff here got added in today. We didn't have any of that. All we had was the table in the middle of the room.
I say there was just a patch a few minutes ago. So let's see. Where'd you guys go next?
We're in the middle.
In the middle, okay. With this nice... I love the ceiling in this room.
So one thing we got to point out is this map has got a lot less stuff on it than it did about an hour ago, because they implemented what we're assuming are the projects, the dilithium quality of life projects. So a lot of the fancier stuff has disappeared.
Now, one of the main things that this fleet holding is going to bring is the ability to get extra trait slots, and extra active reputation ability slots.
And an extra R&D project.
From this nifty little console right here, which I quite like. Actually, I like all these consoles. They're pretty neat. It's a cool triangular one in the middle.
Actually, they've even changed the UI of these wall consoles, because they were showing a bunch of time streams crisscrossing like you saw in Anorax's ship. But they've changed.
I still have them in the...
If I remember correctly, there are also more consoles on that top little sectional wall, so I think we'll see them come back with an unlock.
Well, we got to spend our dilithium vouchers from all our Delta recruits on something, right?
Yeah.
If we still have any of them. I think I still have some.
I think I spent mine on Starbase tier upgrades.
Which, on a completely unrelated note, I have to say thank you, Cryptic, for making those account-wide. Can't tell you how awesome it is to unlock it on each and every one of my characters.
Oh yeah.
I just find it frustrating that you can't unlock it on other Delta recruits.
Nope, you got to earn it on each one.
Yeah, but each faction has different rewards. Is the
True.
downside to that.
Well, actually, the only part of the faction thing that's different is the names and number of the missions you need to play to earn the stuff. Because, I mean, it's always the same things, just you go about getting it in a somewhat different way.
But I think if you're a non-Delta recruit, you actually get more because you get the benefit of
All three factions.
Yeah. If you
Well,
unlock all three factions.
Just in marks though, because
Yes, in marks. That's what I mean.
it's
So-
it's the extra mark boxes are the only thing that the Delta recruits don't get.
So what do you suppose this thing is?
It was spinning, was lit up. I'm assuming it's some sort of generator of some sort.
Temporal
The
engine.
time flux capacitor.
And
The other
it's
one was the really cool.
timey-wimey things.
One in the other room was a lot cooler. We'll see that in a minute.
I like these walkways. And railings. We're sadly lacking in railings.
Yes. Railings
How
alone.
many of our maps that we build in the Foundry would just completely fail OSHA regulations?
That reminds me of one of the things that has been on my want list for the Foundry the longest: catwalks and railings.
Well, we have the grates, which make decent
Yeah, but
catwalk
they're-
floors,
But they're only one style. And, they're sort of that rusty, generic ship style. Whereas
Also, they're
these are a little
tiny.
cleaner.
And if you're like me and you have an idea in your head where you want to put in like a quarter mile of catwalks onto a map, placing those tiny little square grates would get old really fast.
Yep, you got a lot
Also,
of
it would eat up your
objects.
asset limit.
Nice lighted stair here. And some interesting doors that don't open.
But they didn't open before.
nope.
Those
they're
aren't
just,
supposed to go anywhere.
Well, it's like with the new Romulan and Klingon doors that we got from the Romulan Republic storyline. Now we have Krenim doors.
Yes, Krenim doors.
So
Lots of-
this is the R&D room, mostly. That big open area up here at the top of these stairs, when lit up, looks like a disco ball. It's hilarious. So this is, I guess, the main temporal generator. I didn't bring my cat, otherwise I could get in there. And this door over here goes into the coolest holodeck we have in the game.
But not right now.
Oh, it was
'Cause
there,
it's-
but they added a door.
Because it's a vanity unlock. So unfortunately, we won't be able to see it right now.
Not for a while, at least. I sure hope they make that the first unlock.
I was just thinking we should test Schrodinger's temporal cat. At some point, the cat is and isn't erased from the timeline.
Well, one thing that I find to be rather mind-boggling is that most of the people who quote that don't seem to understand the reason why Schrodinger came up with that thought experiment. Schrodinger actually came up with the thought experiment to explain why he thought the uncertainty principle was a form of observation flaw. Or I guess you could say it was the result of the limitations of our ability to observe the universe.
I buy that.
So that is the new fleet holding in a nutshell. I don't know, what other things have you found, Primar, that we will be able to buy here?
Well, there's some new science consoles and that are quite interesting. Actually, let me go look at them before I give you what they do in case they changed.
If you hear a weird buzzing sound, it's because Primar is actually on his phone. Yeah, he's probably getting a call or a text or something.
Yeah, it's probably someone sending something over Twitter.
You realize everyone's going to start tweeting Primar just to see if he'll buzz live on the show.
I just muted it.
Oh,
So,
you're no fun.
The science consoles, there are two versions. There's the restorative particle generator, mostly, and it is a plus all damage bonus for 30 seconds when you use a halt or shield heal. And there's a whole bunch of versions of that. And there's also ones that are exotic versions, so plus 10% bonus for whenever you use an exotic damage ability. So those gravity bolts are going to enjoy that as well.
It's a field day for science captains.
Yeah, I got a few that are bugging me already for them. And then we've got special kit frames that, for example, the engineering ones can come with one ability built in that's from another career, so you get one science or one tactical ability. They're pretty interesting.
Just something I remember them devs mentioning like a long time ago in response to a question about whether they would allow cross profession powers.
Yeah, it was, when they first started setting up this new kit system. I remember them saying something about it.
Well, I remember going back much further than that.
Well, it was one of those old things that they would be like, maybe eventually, and wouldn't commit to anything.
Well, in any case, obviously there's lots of great stuff on this map. Of course, it comes in after we did that poll, so it doesn't appear there, but certainly if anyone at Cryptic is listening, there's obviously just tons and tons of stuff that we would... God, it would be awesome to have. Especially because I personally, I think the Krenim are a cool race, and I'd love to build stuff with them and put them in a mission, and this would be a fantastic way to do it. Just take everything out of this map and stick it in there.
Well, hopefully the Krenim uniform will show up before too long.
Oh, I've already got it on.
Oh, I meant in the Foundry.
You mean the one that's already there?
It's partially there.
Right.
It's only for men, and there's no ranks unless they've added more to it.
Which should point out the Krenim uniform you buy here once you get that unlocked.
Yeah, kind of like the Dyson researcher uniform, I think.
It's after
which Dragoon happens to be wearing.
Look, I think it's
probably like a tier 2 thing, or tier 1.
Yeah, it's tier 2 in the research subtree. There's a couple other interesting things. There's duty officers that you can buy that have no special ability if they're slotted. They seem to be specifically for donating to Fleet Project.
Are they like cheaper?
They have specific R&D traits as well, it looks like. I'm looking at the purple Krenim Doth is 30,000 fleet credits. I don't know.
It may just be another way for some crafters to get those very rare crafting Doths.
Yeah. People have been wanting a way to get R&D Doths reliably for a long time.
And this is a way to do it. So I just pulled up the bridge officers as well. And they have a couple specific traits. They look like they have 4 special traits on them. Well, actually, it's Flux is a passive trait that they all have, which is 20% recharge speed for all non-weapon abilities, just for themselves. Engineering ones get a plus 10% recharge for all engineering bridge officer abilities, can stack 3 times. And then the science one is for science abilities and tactical are for tactical abilities. I'll definitely be picking up a few of those guys.
I don't know if I want an all Credum away team, but it definitely sounds pretty cool. Or is this space?
Why wouldn't you want an all? Well, why wouldn't you want an all Crinum away team?
Depends.
Well, I just picked up one of the tactical ones, and he came. Let's see. He came with Fire at Will 1, Overload 2, Rapid Fire 2, and Scatter Volley 3. So that's pretty good as far as I can tell.
So here's the question: is can you have more than one?
It looks like it. Let me see.
Is there recharge reduction for space or ground?
I'm checking now.
I heard something to the effect that the recharge reduction power that the Crinum buffs have only affects that specific buff.
Because it does. Trying to pick them up now.
You know me, I like to have sort of RP crews, and I think it's fairly obvious at this point that we're going to get a Crinum ship of some kind. And I made a character to be a Crinum, so obviously there's no parts for that in the Alien Creator, so I made one that has sort of hair that obscures where those little bony things would be on the forehead. But if I could have real Crinum buffs, I'll take it.
Well, the Flux trait, which is the one for non-weapon abilities, that one says it's specifically for them. The other one does not. The Flux one is ground, temporal tactics, which is recharge time for their career specific is a space trait.
Okay. I'm guessing the profession specific one does stack with each other up to, as it says, 3 times.
Yeah, it says stacks up to 3 times from different active officers. I see that now.
So a lot of bonuses. A lot of good stuff that you can get here. I'm speculating that the 10.5 patch will go live on Thursday. Next Thursday.
Probably next week.
Not tomorrow. Now, do you guys remember the last sort of half seasons that we've gotten? Has there been Foundry downtime?
Minor.
I think all it was the republish.
I don't know. I want to say it's gone either way. I don't think they've all been yes or no.
I don't remember.
I think it was just the republish, but they didn't take it down for an extended period of time like they have been for the big season.
But it's a good question to pass along to Zero or Trendy, see if they can check for us.
Whether they'll do a republish or not, I'm sure they'll be able to tell us that.
I think it really depends on how much it affects the system.
Mm-hmm. Well, let's see. We got a new... I mean, there isn't any new sort of game-wide systems. Well, there, other than the Armada system. But I don't know how much that changes any underlying code or anything like that, so couldn't tell you. Well, let's see. Moving on. There isn't too much Foundry news going on. I think people are getting their spotlights re-upped. I got mine back up, and I think all of the Purity missions are up by now, as far as I know. So people can finally play through that again.
Need to finish fixing mine. I got a fix partially implemented.
Well, better get it done. I think Zero said 2 weeks.
That's true. No excuses.
No excuses. Get it done tonight, after the show, obviously. But I know. Casmodian finally finished his updates last night. He had a bunch of. He had a spotlight that had been there for a long time, and actually some of the objects had moved on him during various republishes. So he had definitely been working on that. Well, let's see. Why don't we move it along to what we've been working on? So, who wants to go first? Obviously, we know what Primar's been working on. Primar's been working on this fleet holding. And he doesn't Foundry too much, even though he's a big part of our Foundry community. Oddly enough.
So it seems midnight just finished off the map, so I'm sure if we leave and come back, it'll be a little bit different.
Oh, that's right, because projects finish instantly, don't they?
Yep. I'm checking. I'll let you know if it does.
We may have to all leave.
Can't you just beam up to your ship as a group and then beam back down?
I'm checking.
Wait, well, where's the transporter pad in that fleet holding again?
There isn't one.
Did you have to run to the other side of the donut?
There isn't one.
There isn't one. The outside is nifty, I have to say. The exterior.
Okay, so how do you beam up from it? Is it like the mine where there's this button in the UI?
You have it. Yeah, you have a traffic control button that allows you to beam up. Pack says he's been working on burning the old Ryza island to the ground.
Oh, yes.
One of his Iconian missions.
Yeah, he stuck a bunch of those fire props on it.
Up in the trees.
The traffic control thing.
Yeah.
The traffic control thing spit you out its soul.
Probably because that's where he was when Primar invited him to the map the first time.
Oh, well, I mean, because with the mine, there's 3 options. One of them is return to sector space. One of them is beam to ship, I think.
The sector space one always spits you out wherever you were before you entered the map. So if you got to it from somewhere not even near where it actually is, it'll spit you back out there.
I found it.
You'll
In the
have
Delta
to,
Quadrant.
you'll
Yeah,
have
it's
to
just a little to the right from where you beam in.
This character hasn't progressed very far, so you'll have to send me an invite again.
Actually, it didn't actually change anything for me. Whatever, no big deal.
Yeah, so no changes at tier 3. Probably because everything will have a dilithium unlocked now.
Invite me back in when you can.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, really? Oh, sorry. Twitch did that thing where it logged me out in the middle of the show again.
Actually, me too, just now. Not really sure if I remember my password. All right, so let's see. Mark, have you been doing any Foundry work lately?
Believe it or not, yes. I know, shocking. I've actually gone back to working on the this old mission I came up with called the Brigadoon. Trying to make a recreation of something from one of the Dragon Quest games. And I looked at it and realized why it was that I stopped. Do we have anything better than those giant ramp props that we can use for staircases? 'Cause that was part of the reason why I stopped, is I realized how few options I had for those.
There are a number of objects that you could use to make a staircase. You'd have to put down a lot of them, of course.
Hmm.
Like the grates that we were talking about earlier. You could stack those in a staircase.
I might have to use those because the approach I had been taking of using ramps for internal staircases was not working. That was part of the reason why I stopped working, because I reached that impediment and kind of scratched my head on a solution and couldn't come up with a decent one.
I used colony stairs once, but it costs a fortune. Or colony shelves.
Oh yeah, those
Yeah,
things.
colony
Those actually
shelves.
do make decent stairs, but like you said, you have to put a lot of them on.
And also some of it depends on, how far you have to go with your staircase, how tall it's going to be. And, what sort of building style you're going for. Like what colors would you like to have, if possible? Is there other walls and things around it you want it to kind of blend in with so it looks consistent style-wise?
Be honest, at the moment, I'm more concerned about making something that has the correct building layout, because it's not something where it's just the outside of a building. It's one of those things where it's an RPG game where you run around inside the building and you kill a bunch of enemies and so on and so forth inside the building. Here's one thing that I wanted to, part of the reason why I wanted to do this, in the game, when you see Castle Brigadoon is this ancient ruin that is only partially intact. And you wander around the castle, you fight the creatures that have come to live there after it had fallen into ruin. And of course you kill the creature that evicted the former inhabitants, but, well, like I said, the place is a deserted ruin. And in the game, you never get to see what it looks like before it became a ruin. And that was actually part of the reason why I wanted to do this. Is first I went to make a simulation of what it looks like in the game. Then wanted to attempt to make it look like I think it would have looked like before it turned into a deserted ruin. Because, well, in the game, you can see these places where you have what's obviously a hallway, but there's no roof over it, and the walls just end in these, like, crumbled stones at this one point, and you're like, okay, so where was that originally going? And the variety of things like that.
Well, speaking of ruins, we have now the New Romulus ruins in various pieces. So one of those might work to make a staircase out of.
I might be able to use those now that I think about it.
And I think
In fact, there is
ramps
a
as well.
there are steps in the
There
new
are steps?
Romulus ruins.
Really?
Huh. Well, one thing that I had been using is the Grethor props for the castle walls, because that's more or less what the Grethor props are meant to be used for. And
But yeah, some combination of that, and then maybe like some of the Vulcan buildings can look sort of like ancient castle-y.
mm,
A little bit.
well, see, part of the thing that makes this challenging is that it's a three-dimensional model that is a model of both the outside and the inside of the castle. So as for making this thing complete, I need to have it so that people can run around through the hallways inside the castle, which is part of what's been making this challenging. Is because that's why I had the issue using the ramps, is that I couldn't make the ramps fit inside.
Hmm. Yeah, that would make it challenging. You want to have essentially a full-scale castle inside and out, instead of having it like, you see the outside from without, and then when you go inside you transition to a different map.
Actually, that's just it, is that I'm planning on not doing that.
Yeah,
exactly. My plan is to have it so you usually like walk up the stairs, then you walk in through the door, and then you walk down a different staircase, and et cetera, et cetera.
That was kind of the tactic that I was taking on my crashed space station. I kind of used the technique that Dragoon used in Shadows of Midas to create his crashed starship. In his, you kind of go up to it, and there's just like maybe, what is it, one sort of interior room, like an airlock.
Yeah,
that
there's
you
just an airlock
go
area.
into, and then you transition to another map where you're inside the ship, right?
Well, I had an entire city on that map, so I was
Yeah, I mean, you
surely
had other things on the map. But I was taking the different tactic of you run right up to it and go in the entrance and go through the whole thing, and you're still in one map.
Having seen earlier development than that, I thought it was a cool map.
Mm-hmm.
I hope
It's a little bit on
day.
hold right now. I would love to finish it one day. That's one that's going to be probably a little bit difficult to finish without, with this current bug that we have. So.
Yeah, that was part of the thing I was talking about, is that when I would look at what I'd worked on with the castle, I would see the stone platforms I'd placed as one set of blurry static, and then I would see the walls and the other things that I put onto the map as slightly differently shaped blurry static that mostly blended together.
Yeah, I hesitate to think what would happen if I open that crashed space station map.
I forgot to mention why making the stairs is so important for Castle Brigadoon. That's because the map layout has several floors. Because there's like this basement where they have the dungeon and the armory used by the castle guards. There's the main floor, which has actually in the game, the main floor is mostly exposed to the elements and covered in plants and stuff, and you can't really tell what it was meant to be used for. It was probably a courtyard, but it's hard to be sure. And then of course, there's several other places in the castle on various levels. The most amusing part is that when you go on into the map in the Dragon Quest IX game, when you get up into the King's Throne Room, it's actually like the tallest part of the castle you can get to. There's this door, you go outside, you see a staircase that literally leads to nowhere, because My best guess is that there was like a balcony where the king could step out of his throne room and address the people standing in the courtyard. But of course, that was before it turned into a deserted ruin.
Sounds a little bit like I don't know if you played any of the Dragon Age games, but the latest one has a castle that your player and their organization take over, and it's kind of a ruin, and it has all kinds of different levels and all kinds of different rooms and places to explore and things like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, sounds pretty similar. Well, one of the interesting things I noticed when I was looking over the maps is that the basement level in the game actually also has these little, like, cave things that are connected to it, which I have no idea what to do with those. It was kind of interesting making props for those,
though. All right, Dragoon. From what you've told us at the beginning of the show, you've been a little bit occupied by another game lately.
Does not mean I haven't done anything in the Foundry. I've actually been playing around with a little map building as best I can. And this kind of goes to, you remember earlier this week I tweeted out that I had this brilliant idea for a Iconian War Anthology mission.
Mm-hmm.
And
you said you had a great map idea.
I did,
as I recall.
and this is what inspired it. So this is a shot we see in the what's the episode with Sela, where you find the Iconians and then they move their sphere into the Milky Way.
Uneasy Allies.
Uneasy Allies.
So, yeah, at the end of that, you are called to warp into the Iconia system, and you come out of warp like right next to the sphere. So it's just this huge wall of the sphere, like up close. And I want to create that as a ground map, so that this would be the idea of this mission would be that you are assisting by spacewalking literally on the outer surface of this Dyson sphere. So I'm kind of judging the patterns and trying to see if I can recreate it in the Foundry.
One thing I noticed as I studied this is that it's a repeating pattern that has multiple scales to it.
Yeah, it's
multiple layers.
You see the same elements, but repeated in different sizes.
So what sort of assets are you using to try and recreate this?
Well, I mean, I've only kind of done some preliminary, like mapping out, and so lots of foundation walls to kind of set things up and get the structure in there. I haven't found anything good that work in purple yet. But the moment what I'm kind of thinking about is that the episode might revolve around you trying to assist a Starfleet effort to, or an Alliance effort to cut their way into the Andromeda sphere.
Mm-hmm.
Getting in via more conventional means, and then you would then be helping defend this starship that's literally sitting there phasering its way into the sphere. Not a fast process.
Kind of like what Picard discussed in that episode with the Janolan sphere, where he talked with Data about how many years it would take to have the Enterprise's phaser beams cut a hole large enough for the Enterprise to fly out.
Well, I assume in this case, between advances in phaser technology and presumably that they could like basically park a starship like right above and focus all of their energy on it. So I'm thinking
maybe they've created a special prototype ship that has something designed specifically to drill into a Dyson sphere.
Yeah, that's what I was going to suggest. Is that the Enterprise's weapons weren't designed for that purpose, and if you were to use something that was, that would probably give a better result.
Well, at the moment, it's an Odyssey class, and so I was playing around, kind of having it parked above, and then I was been playing around with different ways to kind of simulate the phaser beam.
The thing is huge; takes up the whole map.
Well, that's okay. It looks in scale because,
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, just to give you an idea of the
essentially
scale,
is.
if you think about each of these as kind of like a square, the entire map is just one of those squares. So you're like standing in like one inside in one of the cross members, and so you have the starship above you, like at about 500 meters, and having a little trouble getting the phaser beam. I was trying with those starburst effects, like having a few of them placed in a circle and then
Sure.
just placing a big column of them. But it seems like I'm running into display limits on effects, so they don't
Yeah.
always want to show properly, especially when
Would
the
you be
camera looks
better
away.
off with torpedoes? Would you be better off with torpedoes?
I would need something that's there consistently that requires that you they constantly defend, because I'm thinking that in order to allow the ship to fully dump all of its power to this beam, they've set up like shield emitters like on the surface to reinforce the ship's shields and keep it protected from the Iconians. So what you're doing is defending these shield emitters. So it's kind of a Return of the Jedi scenario. Except that
Well, one thing that,
good
that
guys have
occurs
the
to me is that I wouldn't want to try blasting a hole like that with torpedoes, because you would probably end up you would more or less have to use torpedoes powerful enough to vaporize the rubble that you would create with the first blast, which seems horribly inefficient to me.
What you want to do is drill rather than blast.
Plus, I have a much better chance of faking a phaser beam than I do a photon torpedo.
Okay, now what about those light? I always forget the name. The light things that you use to highlight somewhere where you want to place an object.
Oh, those? They're much too tiny.
Much too tiny. But using several of them.
I seem to remember a specific force field that's like 1 inch by 1 inch by 1 inch and really, really long.
And not pointed in the right direction. Yeah, I mean, you got to realize that the scale of all of this is huge.
What you need.
Okay, because I do have one idea. One of the Borg force field props is kind of cylinder shaped and very tall, and it's rather large. I used it in one of my missions as a containment field. The catch with this object, though, is that you need to put them. One of them rotated 45 degrees from the other because it has an odd arc pattern where there's force field for 45 degrees, no force field for 45 degrees, etc. As it goes all the way around like that.
Okay, I know.
Okay.
I know what you're talking about.
Potential thing to help you with FX display limits. Okay, go the. I'm going to invoke the dreaded JJ films here, but go the route of the Narada's drill. Okay, using say like the big Borg parts or other things, you build a drill that extends down towards the surface of the sphere from the ship, and then under it you only have just a few of those starbursts, say, or whatever FX thing you want to find to use.
That could work. I might keep that in reserve as a backup plan.
Yeah.
My best, I think, right now, my best lead might be those, those firewalls that we have. Like those kind of like placed in like a star pattern, so rotated around. So you have a bunch of them.
Yeah.
And then those kind of form, and then just stack those up. Because those are different from the starburst effect. They're not like an active light source. They're glowy, but not like actively putting out light like the starburst effect is. And then I can just use the starburst effect for where the beam strikes the surface.
Yeah. Plus, those starburst effects are noisy if you get too close to them.
Yeah, but I was kind of
well,
going for
actually,
that.
going
for that.
yeah, the starburst effect, the spot where the beam is hitting the ground, that would actually be pretty perfect, I think.
Yeah. Okay,
But
so
only that.
here's the other question: is when the player I assume would be sort of spacewalking on the surface, right?
Yes.
Would you have some kind of an atmosphere, or would you do the space volume?
No atmosphere. I would do a space volume.
Okay, so they can't fight anybody because space volume also kills NPCs.
That's a good point. I hadn't thought of that.
What you could do is, I don't know, maybe set up some kind of force field around, or a containment field around anything you want the player to be working on that they pump an atmosphere into.
Yeah.
Or put yourself within the force field that you're protecting. You're protecting the generator that's in the force field, and outside of that doesn't have that volume.
Man, that makes things complicated.
Or lie to the player and tell them that if they don't put on a suit, they'll die, even though you haven't actually added a space field.
I should test and see and make sure that the Iconians actually die in a space volume. They probably do.
Yeah, I haven't specifically tested that mob, but I imagine they probably do. Everything else does, even the Tholians, who are in environmental suits.
Yes, but they're in our environment.
But I don't know. You could find a way to hand wave that, or essentially trick the player. Have a space volume that when they first start off in that map, but then once they're in their suit, they're probably not going to take it off. They're not going to think about taking it off. So despawn the space volume.
Oh, I was going to suggest that, but you got to it first.
Yeah, that could work. I could also do like key locations that are like pressurized but not,
Mm-hmm.
and then have others where they spacewalk.
That how large is the space volume? Because if it's small enough, you might be able to do a patchwork thing where it's only on certain parts of the map.
It's
fairly
pretty large.
Yeah, they're fairly large. So here's the other thing: is that this structure is very large. I mean, very large. It's conceivable it could have its own atmosphere naturally.
Yeah.
There's nothing so far that says it hasn't had one. Doesn't have.
Well,
one.
I mean, how much gravity would an object like that really have? A lot. I mean, it would suck in all of the bits of space debris and stuff. The real question is whether it's a breathable atmosphere, and I would go with no. Probably too cold.
Well,
and
I mean,
not enough oxygen.
I mean, as Taka would point it out, the shell of a Dyson sphere does not have enough mass to hold an atmosphere, so any atmosphere has to be artificially generated.
Yeah.
Remember the Enterprise episode where they end up on Mars and they're just running around with rebreathers, more or less? Because it's been partially terraformed, but not completely terraformed.
And the terraforming started by increasing the atmosphere pressure.
So that way
course,
you could have them use
rebreathers.
rebreathers.
The issue on Mars, I think, would be temperature, wouldn't it? Because isn't it very, very cold?
Mars has 3 issues at the moment that prevent it from being livable. One is pressure, second is temperature, and third is the fact that the atmosphere is mostly carbon dioxide.
Yeah.
So, pressure and temperature, apparently they fixed those, but they hadn't managed to get the atmosphere to have enough oxygen yet.
I don't know, what's the temperature at the equator on Mars?
Freezing.
But how close to freezing?
I think it's like 20 degrees below freezing or something.
So with the right gear, you could survive that. I don't know what the pressure is equivalent to.
The pressure is equivalent to being, well, okay. Mount Everest is something like 38,000 feet tall. The pressure on Mars is about the equivalent of being 38,000 feet above the top of Mount Everest. And most people need an oxygen mask to be able to breathe on the top of Mount Everest.
Okay, so here's Mars' atmosphere is about 100 times thinner than Earth's. Without a thermal blanket, Mars can't retain heat energy. On average, the temperature on Mars is about minus 80 degrees Fahrenheit. In winter, near the poles, temperatures can get down to minus 195 degrees. Summer day on Mars gets up to 70 degrees Fahrenheit near the equator. But at night, temperatures can plummet to minus 100.
Ouch.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Also, one thing to remember is that the polar ice caps on Mars are a mixture of water and carbon dioxide.
Yeah, dry ice.
Or at least so they think. I think they're still trying to prove that.
I don't think we've actually landed on the poles, have we?
They came to this conclusion by doing spectrographic analysis of the lights reflected by the ice caps.
Yes, but one of their primary goals is to find actual confirmed ice on Mars as a means of self-sustaining. So,
Melt
one of the proposals for terraforming Mars is basically to put a giant mirror in orbit and to point it at the ice cap. Heat up the ice cap so that all the ice evaporates and makes the atmosphere thicker or something.
In any case, as far as the Dyson sphere goes, you could say it has an artificial atmosphere on the surface.
I could. I mean, if push came to
shove, facilitate repairs or something like that. You don't have to get on a suit to go and make repairs to the exterior.
Trying to think if we've ever. I mean, have we ever had an enemy that we fight in a vacuum?
In Stowe?
Yeah.
In a vacuum, I don't
think so. All of the missions I can think of that require you to wear an EV suit of any kind do not have enemies. They're just platforming stuff. I mean, because there's the one we walk around the outside of Deep Space Nine. There are no enemies there on the outside.
There. That's probably one of the ones that you get in. There's only a couple ones where you go out into space. There's that one, and then there's the one where you take the EV suit with a floater, step between the stars, or whichever one that is.
You know what enemy group should totally be immune to a vacuum, but probably isn't in the game? The Undine.
Because we've seen them in the show.
Well, I wouldn't say immune. I think it's kind of like the way that Saiyans and Kryptonians can withstand an airless environment for a period of time before they eventually have to find air.
Resistant, maybe.
Yeah, I guess that's what it doesn't give them the decompression effect that it does to humans, so they can tolerate it for a while. But eventually they're going to have to find a place of air.
The Hirogen have also been shown that their suits can withstand vacuums.
Even when not completely sealed.
Actually, one of the Hirogen made some boast about how he tracked some sort of life form across the surface of a neutron star. Yeah, I don't understand that one either, but you know.
That just sounds like a fish story to me.
I know, but you know,
the kind of fish story that Hirogen would tell.
Hirogen may or may not be lying when they make wild claims about what their technology is capable of. I mean, because they had that relay network powered by quantum singularities that may or may not have been built by them.
So the other thing you would have to establish if you were to make this mission is, why are we drilling?
Well, that's one of those things, because I mean, I haven't taken the mission more beyond the concepting stage. Like, could you do this? Build this surface, and
and the next question is why. So that would be the other thing you'd have to figure out. Maybe there's something we can. Maybe somebody developed a weapon they think could get rid of that sphere, but you have to get inside it first.
Well, I mean, It's the Andromeda Dyson sphere. I mean, just the fact alone that it's the stronghold for the enemy makes getting in a high priority.
Mm-hmm. Maybe we would think they won't expect attack that way.
No one expects the Spanish Inquisition. And as one person said earlier this week, that no one expects an assassin to simply walk straight in their front door.
All right, so let's see. Anything else you've been working on, Dragoon?
Just a couple of fixes to my spotlight mission. Had this one issue with some of the enemies getting out of their invisible cage and starting the fight before the time is ready.
I've been meaning to ask you because I'm going into what I've been working on, which is I'm in the new collaborative series that we're doing over at Starbase UGC. And one of my maps I'm building is, and I'm not going to reveal too much about it, but it's set in San Francisco. So I was going to ask you about what were some of the assets that you used on your map, because I remember liking your map quite a lot.
Okay. Obviously a lot of Federation buildings. And then once you got into the city, I started to mix it up, as long as it was something that wasn't like obviously alien, or I could hide the alien aspects. I kind of just kept mixing it up. Sidewalks were standard concrete. The streets were that stone brick foundations. The bridge itself was a series of just building block platforms. The spires for those were a Romulan, one of those, those Romulan pillars.
Sure.
Buildings. And the what the big suspension cables, I think I made out of a damaged ceiling light, which unfortunately wanted to disappear when you got too far away. But I couldn't find anything better to replace it with.
Well, part of what I've been building is a big open area, a big sort of grassy park area. And I was in the chat room lamenting the fact that we didn't have any way to put grass down. And Captain P.F. Dennis said, use the green carpet asset, which actually works very well. If you space trees and rocks throughout it, it looks like a sort of a very close-cut lawn, which is perfect.
I was going to say golf course, but yeah.
Golf course, exactly. Yeah, that sort of kind of grass. Very closely mowed.
Did you find a section of grassland that's relatively flat and just place buildings around it?
It wasn't going to be what I needed. I needed to have more control than that.
Okay.
There
are a couple of, I think, rock formations that might have grass on top, but I think they're not particularly flat.
No, they wouldn't be particularly flat and not large enough for what I need either.
One thing I did in one of my missions was taking a rock formation that had stuff sticking out the top of it and embedding it into the floor so that only the stuff sticking out the top was visible. Mm-hmm. I did that because this particular rock formation had several very delicate crystals sticking out the top of it, and it wanted to use the crystals but not the entire rock.
Well, so far it's looking pretty good using the carpet. And I've spaced out a bunch of like walkways made out of the stone-looking building blocks. So they look like there's walkways going throughout it. And I'm going to put in trees and rocks and then border it with buildings. So it looks like a park, essentially. And then part of it is going to be a big official building. And I've been looking at sort of the edifice of the J. Edgar Hoover FBI building and seeing if I can maybe recreate that a little bit with the pillars all throughout it, and then the rooms up above with windows. So I think it's going to be pretty interesting.
It's going to be
extremely asset intensive.
Yeah,
But
well, and that was
it's
why I
okay.
didn't do it. As A, it was asset intensive, and B, in order to make it look really good, it was going to take too much time, and I had to do that mission in a month.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah, it's going to be asset intensive, but luckily the other parts of the mission so far, the map building has been fairly simple, so won't have to worry too much about the rest of it. This is going to be like the big build of this mission, and the rest
Which
of it's
hopefully
going to
you
be.
go inside.
Yeah, part of it, but I'm not going to reveal too much because we want to keep some of it under our hat, right?
If you need
Can't give
to,
away everything.
if you need a quick staircase, I recommend the Cardassian platforms. Just sink the parts that you don't need into a wall
Walls.
somewhere, but you
Yeah,
can stack them really easily.
sure.
Because those would actually make very nice catwalks, if not for the fact that they're attached to these giant metal columns.
Well, you can hide the columns.
Now,
Yeah,
I'll tell you
you did that in one of your missions rather well, actually.
I'll tell you what I will do is when you do go inside this map, is what it's going to be is the front edifice of the map is going to be much larger than the actual interior. The interior is going to be just a tiny little bit that comes off the front, and there's going to be nothing behind the rest of it. I mean that's how you know, it's like the old west town where most of it is a plywood facade and there's nothing behind it.
Well, actually, did you ever see what Mayberry looks like from the other side?
I bet it was similar.
Exactly. So it's like the buildings that they actually had people doing stuff inside, like Floyd's barber shop and a few of the other places, were actual complete buildings. But all the random things that were never used and were just sitting there to take up background and shots were just shells.
Mm-hmm.
And the fun part is that got into 2 episodes of the original series.
Well, it's that principle of don't build what you don't need.
Yeah, exactly.
If you only need something to be in the background, and you're not going to need to go inside the building, why have an inside?
Well, also in Lucille Ball's case, there was also the principle of why rebuild something when you already have one that you can use?
Oh, yeah, I mean, as far as using it on other shows. There's a long tradition of reusing sets, within Star Trek, of, reusing sets and redressing sets from one ship to another or from one location to another. And, between other shows as well. I mean, I remember them talking in, like, Season 2 of Stargate Atlantis. They had inherited a really big set from the movie Blade Trinity, the third Blade movie. And they'd redress it for whatever they needed.
That might be the one that they used for several of the Wraith interiors.
I think
one of my favorite redressed ones is from Live Fast and Prosper. That alien ship that the fake people are using as the Defiant set.
Also, the Excelsior, Prometheus, and the Raven Bridge are all the same.
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm. And, of course, from Star Trek 2, the Enterprise and Reliant bridges are the same. They shot the Reliant bridge first, and then redressed it into the Enterprise bridge again, and then shot that.
Yeah, I think according to the info...
Go ahead.
According to the info, I don't even think Khan and Kirk were anywhere near each other during production.
No, I don't think they were.
I think it was
it was the same set, but on different days.
Oh, yeah. Because, of course, they never meet in person in the movie, other than on the view screen. And, how they did view screens at that point is, they didn't have it playing back on an actual screen or anything. They shot one part of it and then shot the other part of it whenever it fit into the schedule. Blue screen in.
What was the name of the ship that Captain Morgan Bateson commanded?
The Bozeman.
Bozeman.
The Bozeman, yeah. If I remember right, the Bozeman's bridge was a redress of the set they used for the D's battle bridge.
The battle
the
bridge
Enterprise
was very multi-purpose.
Yeah, that was also the Sutherland Bridge and I think a couple of others.
And of course, the sick bay in the TNG movies was just the Voyager sick bay. Hardly
Yeah.
redressed at all.
And Star Trek
Enterprise
5 and
Constant
6
Frenzy.
used a bunch of TNG sets.
Actually, one thing that they demonstrated in First Contact was that not only was the Enterprise E's sick bay laid out the same as the Voyager sick bay, it also came with an EMH.
The same image.
I always thought that was a great touchdown
Oh yeah.
for
Absolutely.
cameo.
Between that one and the
The Doctor,
Neelix
not a
cameo
doorstop.
on the holodeck. They put Ethan Phillips in the holodeck, and then they didn't credit him in the credits, just to see how many people would figure out that that was actually the guy who played Neelix.
It was the maitre d'. I was all of like 12 at the time, but I still picked up on that. I was probably a little older than 12.
Wait,
But
who was that again?
the actor who played Neelix, he was the maitre d' when Picard fires up the Dixon Hill program to escape the Borg.
So he's the one
Oh,
complaining
yeah.
to
He's
the
the one
Borg
who's-
about following a strict dress
We
code.
have a strict dress code.
Well, one observation that I read recently when I looked up an interview that Scarlett Palmer's did about her career and blah, 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 blah. But one of the things that she mentioned about her experience was working with Ethan Phillips is that while Ethan Phillips is a good comedic actor, he's actually pretty good at dramatic acting too.
They say, or Joss Whedon says, that if you can do comedy, you can do all the rest of it. Because it takes really talent and hard work to be funny. And so if you can be funny, you can do the dramatic stuff. I don't know if that always applies, but it's definitely... I've definitely seen any number of comedic actors really play drama very well.
What was
Well,
just recently?
I suppose it could. I suppose some people just don't have the, I guess you say, gravitas to do certain kinds of drama, but I don't know. Maybe those are the minority.
What was it? The actor who they were originally going to have to play Marty McFly in Back to the Future, didn't they say
Eric
they
Stoltz.
originally? Yeah, didn't they have to drop him because he was playing it just too serious?
I think that was the idea. It just wasn't working. How it was going on with him, because they did start shooting.
Okay, so he could master drama, but he couldn't master comedy.
I don't know. Yeah, I've seen him in plenty of other things where he's been good. So not necessarily comedic roles, and I think that movie definitely was better with the comedy aspect. Because I mean, if you imagine Back to the Future as where Marty isn't funny, that just doesn't work.
Yeah.
The film becomes depressing, and
Yeah.
you get this urge to turn it off halfway through the movie.
Yeah, that just wouldn't work at all.
At the risk of driving this tangent even further, I mean, I've always kind of felt that a truly great movie is one that can meld comedy and tragedy together harmoniously.
Well, it's one of those funny things is that I don't really watch comedies. I find I get my laughs in serious movies, like Fight Club. Fight Club is a hilarious movie. I just get so many laughs out of that. And it's not nearly always meant to be that. It's a very dark movie. It's a very serious movie. It's a very warped movie. But I get all kinds of laughs out of that. So I don't know. That's my 2 cents. I like the blend. I like the blend of throwing in jokes into serious movies because it changes the tone. It works better for me than just a comedy movie, with a few exceptions.
Well, one thing that I remember is that did you ever watch Jason X or Freddy versus Jason? Because
I never have watched too many of those.
one of the people I know who was a big fan of those movies didn't like them because, according to him, they weren't true horror movies, and instead of being proper horror movies, they were more of dark comedies.
I think some of those almost strain more to the territory of action movies.
Well, to be honest, those have always had aspects of that, simply because of the fact that both of them are movie series about serial killers who usually hack their victims to death.
Primar in the chat room, you're saying that man, it's Tangent and other franchise night. It's very true. I have discovered that this broadcast, everyone that I know about, happens on Frackstars all the time. We just,
Wasn't that guy just on our show like a few minutes ago? Maybe a half hour ago? What happened to him?
He's still here somewhere.
Yeah.
Why are you typing in our chat room instead of just saying something?
Because I felt like it.
You forgot you had a microphone?
I didn't want to disrupt the flow of the conversation.
You should never be afraid to disrupt the flow of the conversation, especially when we're
always going
off on bizarre tangents.
Well, anyway, let's bring it home, and we'll move on because I have a mission review, which was supposed to be me and Dragoon reviewing a mission, but he got distracted by another game that shall not be mentioned, which, of course, I play as well.
Which you kind of encouraged me to get into. Which
I should point out would be fantastic to have a Foundry type tool for, even though you couldn't do voiceovers, but would totally be awesome.
They wish their developers were awesome enough to build a Foundry.
Every game should have a Foundry.
I keep saying, I mean, you guys do not appreciate what a kind of fantastic tool the Foundry actually is. I mean, yeah, it's buggy.
I appreciate it.
I mean, it's got its limitations.
Because of the. I mean, when I grew up as a gamer, with like the modding community, and like every game that I would play, I'd go look at what the mods were for, and then I think a lot of games got away from that. The sort of corporate mentality shifted away from allowing mods, and especially with MMOs, because the only mods that they would allow are like UI stuff, because it would be so easy to cheat. And so I mean, having a mission builder for an MMO is amazingly awesome.
Well, one thing I remember is that some of the StarCraft games had a mission editor where you could, make your own mission layouts and stuff.
Yeah, and I loved doing that.
But those didn't work for online play. Those were something that you could use for the old TCP.
You could make multiplayer maps.
Not for networks. It didn't work for
you had to have
connection that we have. It's not something hosted on Blizzard's server.
What you had to do is you had to give back in the old days is you had to make sure that the other players had that same map file. You had to give it to them somehow. Then you could play online. But you're
and our Foundry manages to do it without
that
turning
does
off
it for
the
us.
game. I mean, in a single player game, you turn off the game, you install your mod, you fire it back up, make sure your buddies also have turned off, reinstalled, and fired back up. The Foundry does this all automatically without like ever even while the game is running. I mean, it's happening. The modding is happening inside the environment of the game.
Yeah, it does a lot of
Well,
the behind-the-scenes stuff for you, which is very nice.
I remember what it was like as a Diablo 2 modder, and that game had some stuff that was ridiculously hard to work with because, well, for skill editing, one thing I discovered when I attempted to modify certain skills is that, you know, the developers did not actually code skills to be modded, and a lot of the time skills would have inherent limitations where the skill function had things that were hard-coded, like, for example, Vengeance, the very special skill function that does multiple element damage, and if the target is resistant to one of the elements or immune, the skill will do generic magic damage instead of elemental damage, so that it will do good damage even to things that are immune to, say, fire or ice. Yeah, well, it's hard-coded to be a melee skill. So you cannot use that skill function on anything except a melee attack. And then there's the electro ball attack that certain of the enemies use. The splash radius of that attack cannot be changed. There's a radius field in when you look through all the little data fields for the skill, but that's actually just for the radius of the animation of the splash effect, and it actually doesn't do anything at all to the damage of the splash effect.
We've gone off on a tangent again, but
I derailed your review.
Needless to say that it's only going to be my review because Dragoon is off playing a non-Foundry game. So, the mission is Struck by a Viper, right? Am I getting the title right?
I believe so.
Yeah, by Johnny Snowball, who of course is one of my favorite authors. And, you know, he's constructed a very good mission again. Dragoon's going to throw up a nice montage of screenshots so that you can see his excellent map building. He's definitely one of the best map builders we have, you know, definitely on par with somebody like Alimac. Now, one thing is that Johnny Snowball, he's actually one of the authors in our collaborative process, and he was telling us the other day that, you know, he's very inexperienced with space maps. He doesn't do a lot of space maps, and there are actually no space maps in this particular mission.
Yeah, for some reason I prefer doing ground maps too. I don't know why.
A lot of people do, actually, and a lot of people, Foundry authors, they like doing ground maps. There's a lot more you can do with a ground map, a lot more assets to place on them.
I think
a lot more creativity.
I think it's a case of where ground maps are easy for us to understand because it's closer to our actual lives, whereas space maps are a little alien to us.
Now, included in one of these screenshots, an extremely pulled back view to show like how much of this map that he's used, because he really just has put all kinds of stuff on these maps, and there's 2 city maps that are in here, and he's just filled them all up with buildings and objects, and you can see off into the distance, and there's tons of stuff, and there's one particular one where you actually go down into a subway system. All in one map. You do this fantastic chase through. You're chasing a suspect, you know, like an organized crime guy, through this city, and you're running through it and running through it and running through it and running down into the subway and chasing him the whole time. It's great, fantastic sequence. The only thing is, with all of his building, I did lose my bridge officers a few times. Even when we weren't supposed to, so that can be an issue. But you know, when you respawn, because you do have to do a little bit of fighting, when you respawn, you get them all back. So minor inconvenience. But so the plot of this mission is that you go to the colony of New Venus, which has a problem with being able to feed itself. He goes into the various reasons why, but you're there for like a charity benefit. It's a wrestling match that is meant to raise awareness and get help for these colonists. So you'll see on the screenshots there, he's created a really fantastic wrestling arena. I mean, it looks just like a real one. And the best part of it is he's got it so that the arena itself, you know, the ring, is lit up, and the rest of it sort of fades to black. The only unfortunate part is that he's not really able to, because of the limitations of the Foundry, I assume, he isn't able to put a lot of a crowd there. So you have to make do with sort of a minimal amount of spectators. But he's really used the assets that we have to fantastic effect for that particular map. And what happens on that map is somebody dies, and then the rest of the mission, then the main part of the mission is you have to figure out why. You have to investigate this death. And it is a real investigation where you collect evidence, you examine the body, you talk to people. You know, it's like an episode of NCIS or something like that. And it's very detailed. And I think in some places maybe a little too detailed. He has a spot where you are going to examine evidence, and he has 3 branches here, which are, you know, done via dialogue triggers and things like that rather than as part of an objective. These 3 branches that are based on each of the different classes. So if you're a science, you pick the one that says science. If you're engineer, you pick the engineer one. So I was an engineer. I picked the engineer one. And you examine a suspect's datapad, which is encrypted, and you have to break into it. And it's a very long sequence, which I thought a little bit too long, and I expressed this to him in our chat room the other day. It's a little bit too much, and it goes on too long. And he told me that there's a way to actually bypass that. A person who gives you some dialogue at the beginning that says, you can do this, or you can go out into the city itself and do something else to bypass it. I must have missed that part, but it's good that it is there. He does have a lot of dialogue that you can skip, actually, which is very nice. I read some of it and skipped some of the others. I'm a hybrid kind of a person. I don't just skip everything. I like to read some of it. I've seen a screenshot of Johnny Snowball's dialogue trees, and they are incredibly wide. I mean, he just writes volumes, but it's stuff that you don't always want to skip. I mean, it's well written, and it's very interesting. It is. I mean, it's like a detective show, and you get to be the detective, and it's not always what you think, and there's lots of plot twists. Now, mission construction is very good. You spend a lot of time on each map. You don't have to endure a lot of load screens one after the other. There's a lot of parts where, you know, you're in a lot of it takes place in a sort of half underground Starfleet intelligence installation that's on this planet, but you actually run right up and into the city itself. So there's no map transition there, and then you run back down. So I told him it reminded me of the secret installation that they find at the end of the first season of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., but he actually said he based it on CTU from 24, so got several different influences there.
I see you kind of used Vulcan as a base.
He did, and to great effect, I think. He integrated some of the existing architecture. You know, he kind of has this map built up at the level of the, I don't know even what you call it, the shrine on top of the mountain. So he uses some of that and some of the surrounding mountains as a backdrop, kind of, for the map itself.
Yeah, Vulcan has some very interesting geometry on it that you can't really properly replicate in the Foundry, such as that giant tower.
Yes.
That That is apparently where they store the Catric arcs or something.
Hmm. Now, one thing that he was lamenting when I was talking to him about this mission is the lack of wall variety. So if you can see the interiors of some of his Starfleet installation here, has used some of the stone walls, and that is a little bit iffy. I think I'd have gone with the regular Starfleet walls over that particular one, but it's it's kind of a design choice. Now I say his trigger work is very good because he has this particular sequence where you go into a holodeck and the holodeck changes around you into recreating a surveillance holo from earlier, and you have to examine the scene and talk to a witness who is there and examine the scene and try and find something suspicious in there. And there's all kinds of things you can interact with, and there's only one right answer, and you got to find out what that is. And so it took me a little bit to get it, and it took me a lot of times of going back to the witness and talking to them. And it's like real police work.
Hmm.
It is, I would say, a good hour and a half of work there. So, it's not a short mission, but it's a worthwhile mission, and it seems like it's a very good Star Trek mission. It's one where there is some action, there is some shooting, and but it's to service the plot. It's not gratuitous or anything like that. So, I think it's maybe not quite as good as Shore Leave Under Siege, but I think it is very good, and I would recommend everybody play it.
Hmm. Hey, that's that force field prop that Primar was talking about earlier.
Yeah, the really long, narrow one, which doesn't really look much like a force field.
Which is the one that you were using for the light bridge.
Yeah, well, because you can
in our other mission.
I think it originally wrapped around a wire or something like that, a Borg wire that went from one building to another and had a force field around it.
Hmm.
Oh, now I know what you're talking about. Yeah, I think I actually have seen those in some of the Borg things. It's just that it's not one of those things that you notice because it's kind of like a tiny detail hidden in the environment.
But no, it uses it to great effect for those railings.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Johnny is very good at coming up with things out of nothing. He's very good at costuming as well. I handed him 2 pictures of Egan. One from the episode where he's outed and one from the launch. And he created a full Foundry recreation in less than 4 hours. He did the same He did the same thing with 1 picture of Akira Sulu. But that one's a little easier.
It's unfortunate that I was taking these in demo record. So unfortunately it doesn't show any of the custom skins, custom NPCs, of which there are many. So that is my review of Struck by a Viper. So check it out. It is out of review status. It's got 40 some odd reviews, so it's in the general population. I think it's even in the top 3. I can't remember what system, but it's out there. And he did something good, which is he took his summary from the Foundry summary that you pull up when you search for it, and he also put that in the very first dialogue. So that when you get the summary when you pull up to the system and click on it. I think that's something that I may consider doing on my missions. All right, so we got a little bit of time left, and Mark had a topic you wanted to talk about, which is using the Prime Directive in missions.
Yes, because one of the things that has come up in discussions on the forum rather often is, what is the purpose of the Prime Directive? Well, as people pointed out, the way it's used in the original series differs drastically from the way it's used in Next Generation. Because in the original series, it really seemed to only apply to pre-warp civilizations, and they didn't really use it in any sort of context with civilizations that had already attained the ability to travel through space on their own. And of course, it had certain stipulations, such as the healthy and growing clause that Kirk used as a reason to destroy Val, and that other supercomputer thing.
Well, Kirk was kind of a rogue.
And you find that sort of a thematic recurring thing is where the Prime Directive only comes up in conversation in the show when it's about to be broken.
Pretty much.
And everybody gets away with it
in
the show.
Actually, there's one time I can think of where it was invoked as a reason not to do something, but was not broken. And that was in the episode with the Felicium episode of season 1 of TNG. Was either season 1 or season 2? Well, with the Ornarans and the whatever that other race was. Because Picard doesn't. No one mentions the Prime Directive in that episode until the last 5 minutes, where Picard's like, you know what, the Prime Directive prevents me from helping either of you, so I'm just going to beam you back to your planet and leave. Bye.
Well, I mean, the Prime Directive came up earlier in that episode when Crusher wanted to go to the addicted race and tell him what was going on.
And, yes. That's a good point, actually. He cited the Prime Directive as a reason why they couldn't tell the Ornarans what the real problem was. Yeah. Of course, this is one of those situations where I have to question whether the Prime Directive actually applied in this scenario at all, because by the standards used in the original series, the Prime Directive would have been inapplicable here, and Picard used the Prime Directive as a sort of policy of non-interference rather than as a policy of not interfering with pre-warp civilizations.
Yeah, it's one of those things. Yeah, I mean, I don't think we totally understand the full extent of the Prime Directive well.
And to be honest, I've come to suspect that the Prime Directive has been rewritten several times in Starfleet's history.
Probably by the show's writers.
It was one of those things that they often sort of invoked in varying situations where, you know, they were different from each other enough that is like, it's, you know, is it the same document? Is it multiple clauses that deal with whatever comes up? Or they're constantly adding to it as people make new mistakes?
In one episode, I think they mentioned that the Prime Directive, or General Order Number 1, was actually an entire book by the time it got around to the Voyager era.
I believe it. I mean, you're talking... I mean, the Prime Directive kind of falls into... It's a bit like interpreting the Constitution.
Yeah. And of course, the book was all the list of things that people had come up with. Hey, Drogan, question. Those stairs in that one scene from his, are those just a bunch of really small platforms stacked on top of each other?
I believe they are the Great asset, which we were talking about earlier. I think before the show started.
When I was thinking of, looks kind of like gray stone. Oh well. Anyways.
Yeah. So one of the funny things about the Prime Directive that I'm remembering is in Insurrection, when Admiral Dougherty is sort of in his making excuses mode of, you know, trying to justify all the things that he's doing, he says the Prime Directive doesn't apply here. These people aren't native to this system. So it's like, you know, if you expand off your home world, then Starfleet can come in and do whatever they want to, according to Admiral
yeah,
Dowd.
but I mean,
Not that I trust that guy.
Picard counters to Dougherty's statement by mentioning that the Federation had no legal claim to the system because the Federation's the claim that the Federation had that was recognized by interstellar law was based on the assumption that the planet in the Briar Patch was uninhabited.
so I mean, the Prime Directive has been used at times to keep the Federation out of interfering with even fully developed races, such as the Klingons. For instance, with the Klingon Civil War, Federation
Sure.
was not allowed to involve until they found evidence that the Romulans were tampering with or involved.
So once they figured out an outside power.
In that particular instance, it was a matter of not officially supporting any of the factions in the Klingon Civil War, and thus, since they were not doing that, they had no reason to involve themselves entirely, except when they discovered that the Romulans were supporting one of the factions, and they put a stop to that.
I was thinking another instance I was thinking of is the first season of Deep Space Nine, when you have the Circle, and in that case you have an argument between Cisco and an admiral about whether the Prime Directive applies, because while the Cardassians are providing weapons, the conflict is purely internal to Bajor. So it's kind of weird like that.
There is actually a stipulation in the Prime Directive that has been invoked that expressly counteracts most of the other stipulations of the Prime Directive in a case where it's a civilization that has expressly asked the Federation to act as a mediator in a dispute. Which I think was the explanation for why the Creosians were on the Enterprise D in the first place.
I think that's General Order 47. Janeway can do anything she wants.
No. This was a TNG thing.
Well, there was that thing with the Barzan wormhole where I think the Federation was serving as kind of a negotiator, a neutral site. Where they were not supposed to be. Yeah, they weren't interfering, but they were involved.
Well, Picard was acting as the mediator in that one. The Federation was not as a whole because there were certain Federation interests that wanted to acquire the Barzan wormhole.
Sure. And of course, it could be one of those things where the whole document goes out the window when Federation interests dictate it should. If you want to take the cynical view.
Well, see, that's the reason why it's so complicated is because I think all of the stipulations are conditional. It's like in the case with Vol, it's like Kirk is like healthy civilization. Having an alien supercomputer masquerading as a god and telling the natives what to do does not constitute a healthy civilization.
And of course, there could be endless rounds of reviews at Starfleet Command where they're deciding whether Kirk's interpretation of it was correct.
Then there was that one episode where Kirk and a bunch of Klingons were both on the same pre-warp planet doing a Cold War style thing where they were competing to see who could have the most influence on the planet, or in Kirk's case, prevent the other from having influence on the planet. Which was one where they invoked a specific clause, is that if another power has been messing with a pre-warp civilization, it is the Federation's duty to correct that, all while attempting to avoid showing the pre-warp civilization that there are other civilizations in the universe.
Now, bringing this back around to the Foundry is that all these things we've been talking about are all things that you can do in a Foundry mission. You know, you can have a pre-warp civilization that's being messed with by somebody else that you could then go in and try and fix or something. But one of the things that, you know, if you're wondering if your situation comes up, Directive, you know, go on Memory Alpha and look up all the episodes that have dealt with it and see, okay, yeah, it's kind of similar to this. And say, okay, so yeah, we got to invoke the Prime Directive and things like that.
The funny thing about that is that while Memory Alpha has a page listing general orders, the page that is a list of general orders has a hyperlink for general order number 1. That says, click here to read the Prime Directive, basically. And that the Prime Directive has its own. Let's see, how many pages is this, anyways? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. About 8 pages on Memory Alpha about all of the ways that the Prime Directive has been used in the various episodes.
Yeah, I mean, the bottom line for me is that it's one of those things that we don't have the full text anywhere, so it's sort of, you can interpret it for yourself as an author, whether you want to invoke it in your mission, whether you should, and how. It's kind of...
Here's the episode. Voyager Infinite Regress mentions that the Prime Directive had 47 sub-orders by the latter part of the 24th century.
Of course, 47.
Yes, of course.
And of course, you know, it's important to note that for KDF missions, there is no Prime Directive. You're Klingon.
Or the Romulan Republic, technically.
Technically, yes.
Yeah, the Klingon approach to encountering pre-warp civilizations seems to be to subjugate them and use them for slave labor.
Yes.
I know, that brings up
I think the Klingon approach. I think the Klingon approach to encountering any civilization is shoot first, kill them all, get drunk on blood wine, and then tell a horrible story.
Not a horrible story, a glorious story.
That depends on how drunk you are.
Well, that's all the time we have for today, gentlemen. So, Dragoon, if you want to throw up our contact info.
All right. If you want to reach us at email, we can be reached at foundryroundtable@live.com. We are also on Twitter at Foundry Roundtab. Drogan can be reached at Drogan1701. Mark can be reached at Markhawkman. And I can be reached at Greendragoon.
And Primar, your Twitter handle is?
Primar13.
Thank you very much. Well, we will say good night and see you next time.
Good night.
Good night.